In a war zone, Sergeant Jake Anderson found a German shepherd, Rex, injured and alone. They fought side by side, saving each other, until a blast separated them. Jake was left in a hospital, broken and lost, wondering if Rex had survived. 10 years later, Jake walked into a rescue shelter, eyes scanning the dogs. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be? There, staring back at him, was Rex. A hesitant step. Then, Rex's bark, loud, familiar. Their reunion was nothing short of a miracle. But just as Jake knelt to embrace him, something unexpected happened. Rex's collar. It had a message. He wasn't supposed to survive. The words echoed in Sergeant Jake Anderson's mind as he stood in the shelter, staring at the rows of dogs. His fingers twitched, heart racing. The pain from the years of separation, the endless nights of wondering, of hoping, crashed over him. There was no way this could be happening. But there, in the corner, sitting quietly, was a German shepherd with eyes that pierced through him like a bolt of lightning. His mind screamed, "It's him. It has to be him." Jake stepped forward, his boots heavy on the floor, his breath shallow. As he approached, the dog's ears perked up. His amber eyes locked onto Jake's with a recognition that Jake couldn't deny. Rex. 10 years. A decade since they had last seen each other. A decade since the explosion that had torn them apart. Jake remembered the feeling of waking up in that hospital bed, pain radiating through his body, and the crushing realization that Rex might be gone. He never got the chance to say goodbye. But now, after all this time, here he was, standing in front of him, looking just as strong, just as loyal. Jake dropped to one knee, his hands trembling as he reached out. The dog didn't move at first. There was a moment of hesitation. Then, Rex stood up, taking a step toward him, his tail wagging slowly, cautiously. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he extended his hand, and Rex nuzzled it, just like he used to. The bond was instant, undeniable. The years of separation melted away in that single moment. Jake's voice cracked as he whispered, "Rex, I thought I lost you forever." The dog's deep bark filled the room, and Jake could feel the warmth of their reunion flooding over him. He pulled Rex into his arms, his heart soaring. But then, something caught his eye. Rex's collar. It was old, worn, but there was something odd about it. A piece of paper tucked inside, a message. Jake's fingers shook as he removed the small, folded note. His eyes scanned the words, and his breath caught in his throat. "He never gave up on you." It was a message from someone who had been there, someone who had known the pain, the loss, and the hope. The tears welled up in Jake's eyes as the weight of the past decade hit him all over again. Rex wasn't just his partner. He was a symbol of loyalty, of love that transcended time and distance. And in that moment, Jake knew that this reunion was more than just a chance meeting. It was a miracle, a second chance for both of them. But as Jake hugged Rex tightly, one question remained in his mind. Who had left that note? The note burned in Jake's hands. He stood there, staring at it, his heart pounding faster. He never gave up on you. Who was this? Who had left this message? Jake looked down at Rex, who was now lying calmly at his feet, eyes closed, content to be near him once again. Jake had missed him so much, and for a moment, he just wanted to enjoy the peace of their reunion. But the words on that note nagged at him, pulling him back into a reality he wasn't sure he was ready for. "Who are you?" Jake whispered, glancing around the shelter. It was a small, quiet place, filled with dogs that had once been lost, waiting for someone to take them home. But none of the faces here seemed familiar. Jake had never been one to believe in coincidences. The more he thought about it, the more unsettled he became. Someone had been watching them, someone who knew their bond. Had it been the shelter workers? Had it been the people who had rescued Rex after the war? His mind raced with possibilities. But one thing was certain. Whoever had left that note had known the depths of his pain, his struggle, and Rex's unwavering loyalty. Jake's fingers tightened around the note as a sense of determination filled him. He couldn't let this mystery slide by. Not now, not. After everything they had been through. "Rex," Jake muttered softly, bending down to stroke his dog's head. The dog lifted his eyes, meeting Jake's gaze, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. Jake had always believed in signs, and this moment felt like one. This wasn't just a reunion. This was a second chance. But for what? He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story, more to what had happened that day when they were separated. Rex had been through so much, injured, abandoned, alone. And now, they were together again. But Jake felt that familiar weight in his chest, the feeling that they weren't done. Not yet. The shelter's door opened, breaking his thoughts. A woman in her late 30s walked in, her eyes immediately locking onto Jake and Rex. She had an air of quiet authority about her, and something about the way she approached made Jake's heart skip a beat. "I see you two found each other," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I knew it was only a matter of time before you did." Jake stood up slowly, feeling a rush of uncertainty. "You knew?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. The woman nodded, her eyes softening as she glanced down at Rex. "Rex was one of the first dogs we rescued when the war ended. I've seen the bond between the two of you. It's rare, almost unexplainable." Jake felt a shiver run through him as she spoke. Was she the one who left the note? "I'm Emma," she said, offering her hand. Jake shook it, still trying to process everything. "How did you know?" he asked, his voice a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Emma smiled faintly. "Because there are some bonds that even time and war can't break. You and Rex, you're meant to be together. And I think that note you found was just the beginning." Jake's heart raced again. There was something more going on here, something deeper than a simple reunion. And just as he opened his mouth to ask more, Emma stepped back, her expression turning serious. "There's something you need to know about Rex's past. Something he's been carrying all these years." Jake's breath caught. What could it be? What had his dog been through before he came back into his life? Emma's gaze grew more serious as she looked at Jake, her hands folding in front of her. "Rex didn't just survive the war, Jake," she said softly, her voice tinged with sorrow. "He carried something with him. Something no one knew about. Something he never told you." Jake's heart skipped a beat. His mind raced with questions, but he remained silent, waiting for her to explain. Emma sighed deeply, as if gathering her thoughts. Rex was more than just a partner in battle. He was part of something bigger, something that goes beyond the bond you shared with him. When the war ended, he was one of the dogs sent to the shelter for adoption. But before that, he had been part of a covert mission. He knew things, saw things he was never meant to witness. Jake blinked, trying to wrap his mind around what Emma was saying. "Covert mission?" he asked, his voice shaky. Emma nodded slowly. "Yes, Rex wasn't just a regular service dog. He was part of a specialized K-9 unit. And during that mission, something happened. Something so classified, so dangerous, that Rex was left with memories that haunted him long after the war." She paused for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. Jake's pulse quickened. "What happened to him?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma hesitated, then spoke again, her eyes meeting his. "Rex was injured during the mission. Not physically, but mentally. He saw his handler, someone he was bonded to, taken from him in a way that no one could have prepared him for. He was left alone, lost in a foreign country, surrounded by chaos. And yet, he survived. But it was more than just survival. It was the way he survived. He had to carry that trauma, carry those memories of betrayal and loss, long after the war ended. And even when he was placed in the shelter, waiting for someone to adopt him, he didn't know if he would ever be able to trust again." Jake's breath caught in his throat. "But he trusted me," he said, his voice breaking. "He trusted me. Why didn't he tell me?" Emma shook her head gently. "He didn't know how? He's not the type to burden anyone with his pain. He thought he could protect you from it. But deep down, Jake, you were the one person he needed. The one person who could give him the peace he was searching for." Jake looked down at Rex, who was now lying at his feet, his eyes closed as if sleeping peacefully. He reached down and gently ran his fingers through Rex's fur, feeling the warmth of the dog's body, the comfort he had always brought him. But now, there was a new layer of understanding. Jake realized that their bond went deeper than he had ever imagined. Rex had been through things that Jake could never fully comprehend, but despite everything, they had both made it through. "What do I do now?" Jake asked, looking up at Emma. "How do I help him?" Emma gave him a soft smile. "You're already doing it. Just by being here, by showing him that he's not alone anymore. That's all he needs. You don't have to fix everything. Just be the man he remembers. Be the man who brought him back from the darkness." Jake nodded, a wave of emotion washing over him. He had always thought of Rex as his partner, his friend, his protector. But now he understood that it was Rex who had been protecting him all along. And he would never take that bond for granted again. Thank you, Jake said, his voice full of gratitude. Emma nodded. It's not just me you should thank, Jake. It's Rex. He's the one who never gave up on you. Jake smiled, his heart swelling with love for the dog lying beside him. He knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. Rex had been through so much, and yet, here they were, together, stronger than ever. And for Jake, that was all that mattered. As the days passed, Jake and Rex settled into a routine, one that was simple but deeply comforting. Every morning, Jake would wake up to Rex's gentle nudges, his loyal companion eager to start the day. They'd go for long walks through the park, Jake feeling the weight of the past lifting with each step. The sun would rise, casting a warm glow over their path, and Jake would feel grateful for this quiet peace, a peace he had once thought was lost forever. But as time went on, something began to stir in Jake's mind. Despite the peace he had found with Rex, he couldn't shake the questions that lingered, the mystery behind Rex's past, the note that had been left for him, and the weight of the secrets Rex had carried all these years. Jake knew Rex had been through so much. Emma's words still echoed in his mind. You don't have to fix everything. Just be the man he remembers. But Jake couldn't help but feel there was more he needed to understand, something that could make their bond even stronger, something that could give Rex the closure he deserved. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Rex's head resting on Jake's lap, Jake spoke softly. What happened to you, Rex? What did you see? Rex lifted his head, his amber eyes locking with Jake's. There was no answer, of course. Rex couldn't speak the words. But Jake could see it in his eyes, the pain, the loss, the memories that had shaped him. Jake ran his fingers through Rex's fur, feeling the familiar warmth. I'm here now, Jake whispered, and I'm not going anywhere. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. The only sound was the gentle rustling of the wind through the trees, the world around them quiet, as if holding its breath. But Jake knew that Rex needed more than just his presence. He needed to know that he wasn't carrying those heavy memories alone anymore. The next day, Jake made a decision. He called Emma. I need to know more about Rex's past, Jake said, his voice steady but determined. I need to understand everything he went through. Emma was quiet for a moment, then spoke with a hint of concern in her voice. Jake, you know that Rex's past is not an easy one to revisit. There are things he's been through that you might not be ready to hear. Jake paused, looking at Rex, who was now lying at his feet, watching him with a calm, steady gaze. I need to know, Emma. I need to help him. Emma sighed. All right, I'll help you, but you need to be prepared. Rex's story is not just about survival. It's about something deeper, something he's been carrying all these years. Jake's heart raced with anticipation, but he was ready. He had made a promise to Rex the moment they reunited. No matter what the past held, they would face it together. As the conversation ended, Jake stood up, walking over to Rex and kneeling down beside him. We're going to get through this, Jake said, his voice low but filled with resolve. Whatever it takes. Rex let out a soft bark, as if in agreement, and Jake smiled. For the first time in years, he felt like he was finally ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that Rex would be by his side. And together, they would uncover the secrets of the past, healing the wounds that had been buried for so long. The next morning, Jake woke up early, the sun still low in the sky, casting a soft glow over the landscape. Rex was already awake, sitting by the door, waiting for him as he always did. There was a quiet anticipation in the air, and Jake could feel it in his bones. Today, he would finally learn the truth about Rex's past. As they drove to Emma's house, the drive felt longer than usual, each mile stretching out before him like a lifetime. He glanced at Rex, who was sitting beside him, calm but alert, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Jake reached over and patted his dog's head. We're in this together, he whispered. When they arrived, Emma was already waiting for them. She looked at Jake, her expression a mix of sympathy and resolve. You sure you're ready? She asked, her voice steady. Jake nodded, his jaw set. I need to know. Rex needs to know. Emma led them inside, where a small table was covered with documents, old photographs, and papers Jake didn't quite understand. As he sat down, Rex curled up beside him, his presence a steady comfort. What you're about to hear isn't easy, Emma began, sitting down across from them. But it's the truth, and Rex deserves to know that he isn't alone in what he's been carrying. Jake nodded again, his eyes on Rex. The dog looked up at him, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Emma took a deep breath and began. Rex was part of a mission that went south. Not just a regular operation, but a highly sensitive one. He was trained for deep reconnaissance, for situations where humans couldn't go. But there was a moment, during a raid, when everything changed. Rex's handler was gravely injured. They were trapped, surrounded. The mission was supposed to be a quick extraction, but it turned into something far worse. Emma paused and Jake could feel his heart rate quicken. "What happened?" he asked, his voice thick. Emma continued, her voice steady but carrying the weight of years of untold stories. Rex's handler was separated from him during the chaos. And in that moment, Rex did something extraordinary. He stayed. He fought to protect the mission, even after everything went wrong. But in doing so, he had to leave his handler behind. It broke him, Jake. It broke him more than anyone could imagine. Jake's hands clenched at the table. He could see it now, Rex's loyalty, his struggle, his sacrifice. He knew Rex had been through hell, but hearing it like this, seeing it from a new perspective, made it all the more real. Emma continued. After the mission failed, Rex was brought back to base, but he never fully recovered. They tried to place him with other handlers, but he couldn't bond with anyone the same way. He knew, deep down, that he had failed his handler. And he carried that guilt, that loss, with him. Jake looked at Rex, his heart aching. "I never knew," he whispered, the weight of it all settling on him. "I never knew how much you went through." Rex lifted his head, his eyes meeting Jake's, and for the first time, Jake saw the depth of the bond between them. It wasn't just about being partners in combat. It was about the shared pain, the shared survival, the shared strength. Emma stood up and walked over to the table, picking up a small envelope. "This was left for him," she said, handing it to Jake. It was found with Rex after the mission, a letter from his handler. "It's the last piece of the puzzle." Jake carefully opened the envelope, his hands trembling as he pulled out a folded piece of paper. The letter was simple, but the words were powerful. "I know you did everything you could. You saved me, even when I couldn't save myself. You are my brother. Don't carry the weight of this. Move on. Find the one who deserves you." Jake's eyes welled with tears as he read the words. He had always known that Rex was special, but now he understood the depth of his loyalty and the pain he had been carrying all these years. "You're not alone anymore, Rex," Jake whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You never were." Rex nuzzled his hand, as if to say, "I'm home now." And in that moment, Jake knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, just as they always had. Their bond was unbreakable. It was a bond forged in war, in loss, and in the quiet moments of healing. And nothing could ever tear them apart. Weeks passed, and Jake and Rex grew closer, their bond stronger than ever. Every morning, Jake would wake up to Rex lying at his feet, the dog's steady breathing a comforting presence. It felt like they had found their rhythm, their peace after so much chaos. But even in their quiet moments, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that Rex was still carrying something inside him, something that had yet to be fully released. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Jake spoke up. "I keep thinking about what Emma said," he said, his voice thoughtful. "About Rex's past, the mission, the guilt he carried." Rex lifted his head at the sound of his name, his amber eyes meeting Jake's. "You know, buddy," Jake continued, "I don't think it's just about what happened back then. I think it's about what happened after. You kept going. You didn't give up, even when everything seemed lost." Rex's tail wagged slightly as if in agreement. Jake smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude for the dog beside him. But as he looked at Rex, he couldn't help but wonder if there was more to their story, more to the message from Rex's handler, more to the bond they shared. The next day, Jake made a decision. He would visit the place where Rex had been stationed, the place where everything had changed. Emma had given him the location after their last conversation, a small town near the border where Rex had been part of a special operation. Jake had been reluctant to visit at first, unsure of what he might find. But something told him it was time to face the past, not just for Rex, but for himself too. The drive was long, stretching through quiet highways and fields that seemed to go on forever. As they neared the town, Jake's thoughts grew heavier. He glanced at Rex, who sat beside him, calm as always, but there was something in the dog's demeanor that suggested he knew what was coming. When they finally arrived, the town was small, almost deserted, with only a few buildings standing in the shadow of the mountains. Jake parked the car near an old, dilapidated warehouse and got out, Rex following him with steady steps. The place felt empty, abandoned, as though it had been frozen in time. They walked toward the warehouse, Jake's footsteps echoing in the silence. Rex's ears perked up as they approached the door, his body tense, as if remembering something from the past. Jake knelt down beside him, running his hand over the dog's fur. "We don't have to do this if you're not ready," Jake whispered. But Rex only gave a soft bark, as if to say that he was. Together, they stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the only light came from the faint glow of the afternoon sun filtering through broken windows. The place was eerily quiet, and Jake could feel the weight of history pressing down on them. As they moved deeper into the building, Jake's mind raced with memories of Rex's past, of the things he had endured. It was hard to imagine the dog, once full of life and energy, as the same animal who had been through so much. Rex paused in front of a wall, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. Jake stood behind him, waiting, wondering what the dog was sensing. And then, as if on cue, Rex walked toward a pile of old crates in the corner. He stopped and sniffed again, his body stiff with recognition. Jake approached cautiously, his heart racing. "What is it, boy?" he asked. Rex's tail flicked once. Then he turned and looked up at Jake, his eyes full of something that Jake couldn't quite place. It was as if the dog had found something that had been buried for all these years. Jake crouched down beside him, his hand resting on Rex's back. "What is it?" he asked again. And that's when he saw it. A small, worn-out patch of fabric hidden beneath the crates. Jake reached down, pulling it free. The fabric was old, frayed at the edges, but there was a symbol on it, a symbol that Jake recognized from his time in the military. His breath caught in his throat as he realized what it was, the insignia of the K-9 unit, the very unit Rex had been part of during that fateful mission. Jake held the fabric in his hands, feeling the weight of it, the history it carried. He looked down at Rex, who was now sitting calmly at his feet, watching him with those same amber eyes that had always seen more than anyone else. "This is it, isn't it, buddy?" Jake whispered. "This is the piece of the past we've both been looking for." Rex's tail wagged again, a soft, steady rhythm, as if to say, "We're not done yet." As Jake stood there, holding the worn-out patch in his hands, the weight of the moment settled over him. He could feel Rex beside him, calm but present, as if the dog understood just as deeply as Jake did that this discovery was important. It wasn't just about finding a piece of fabric. It was about uncovering the history that had shaped them both, the bond they shared, and the sacrifices that had been made along the way. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the silence of the warehouse around them. There was something grounding about it, the stillness of the past, the echoes of what had once been. It felt as if they were both standing at the edge of something they could never fully comprehend but needed to understand all the same. Rex's tail swayed gently, as if urging Jake to move forward. Without saying a word, Jake tucked the patch into his jacket pocket and turned to Rex. "Let's get out of here," he said softly. The walk back to the car felt different, like the air had changed, heavy with the understanding of what they had uncovered. Jake glanced at Rex, who was walking beside him, steady and calm, as always. It was hard to believe that this dog, so loyal and gentle, had carried so much pain. As they reached the car, Jake paused for a moment, looking out at the horizon. It was getting late, the sun beginning to set behind the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and Jake felt a sense of peace wash over him. "You know, Rex," Jake murmured, "I think we've both been carrying things for too long." Rex turned his head toward him, his amber eyes full of quiet understanding. "But it's over now. Whatever happened back then, we don't have to carry it alone anymore." As Jake slid into the driver's seat, he glanced at the patch in his pocket. There were still questions, so many questions, but for the first time in years, Jake didn't feel like he was facing them alone. He had Rex by his side, and that was all that mattered. As they drove back home, the weight of the past lifted, and for the first time, Jake felt a sense of closure. Not because everything had been answered, but because he finally understood the most important thing. Rex had never given up, and neither would he. Whatever came next, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face it together. Jake looked down at Rex, who was resting his head on the armrest, his eyes half closed, content and at peace. "We made it, buddy," Jake whispered. "We made it through the worst of it. And now we get to live." Rex lifted his head slightly, looking up at Jake, and with a soft bark, as if to say, "I'm right here with you." The drive home was quiet, but for the first time in a long time, it was a peaceful quiet. Jake knew they had faced the darkest parts of their past and come through stronger, together. Whatever came next, they would face it as a team. Nothing could break the bond they shared. Nothing could undo the years of loyalty, sacrifice, and love. Rex had saved him more times than Jake could count, and now it was his turn to make sure Rex knew that he was never alone again. The days after their return home passed by slowly, each one feeling like a step toward a new beginning. Jake and Rex settled into their routine, the kind of routine that didn't need words to be understood. They spent their mornings walking through the park, their evenings sitting quietly on the porch, and their nights with Rex curled up at Jake's feet, a comforting presence in the silence. Yet, even in the peaceful moments, Jake couldn't forget about the patch, the letter, and the history that had been buried for so long. He had started to piece together the fragments of Rex's past, but the pieces didn't fit perfectly. There was still more to discover. One evening, as the golden light of the setting sun bathed the house in warmth, Jake sat at his desk, staring at the old photograph of Rex and his handler that Emma had given him. It was a simple picture, Rex sitting proudly beside a man in uniform, but there was something about it that struck him. The bond between them was evident, but there was also a sense of loss in the way Rex's eyes seemed to look into the distance, as if searching for something or someone. Jake gently set the photo down and glanced over at Rex, who was lying on the rug nearby, his head resting on his paws. "I know, buddy," Jake said quietly, his voice filled with emotion. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Rex looked up at Jake, his amber eyes meeting his, and for a moment, Jake swore he saw something in those eyes, something deep, something that spoke of the years of loyalty, sacrifice, and love that had shaped their bond. As Jake sat there, contemplating everything he had learned, his phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from Emma. "Jake," the text read, "I've been doing some more digging. I think I found something that could help you understand what really happened during that mission. Meet me tomorrow at the old shelter." Jake's heart raced as he read the message. It seemed like there was still more to uncover, more pieces of the puzzle that had yet to be revealed. Without hesitation, he grabbed his jacket and called Rex over. "Come on, boy. We've got one more thing to figure out." The next day, they drove to the shelter where Rex had been rescued, the place where his past had been sealed away. As they pulled up to the old building, Jake's mind raced. What could Emma have found? What was it that could finally give Rex the closure he deserved? When they arrived, Emma was already waiting for them, standing near the entrance with a folder in her hand. She looked up as Jake and Rex approached, her face serious but determined. "I think this is it," Emma said, handing the folder to Jake. "Everything you've been wondering about, it's all here." Jake took the folder, his hands trembling slightly as he opened it. Inside were more photographs, official documents, and a letter from Rex's handler. "Jake, I've never shared this with anyone," Emma began, her voice quiet. "But Rex's handler, before the mission, wrote a letter to a close friend. In that letter, he described his bond with Rex and how he knew that if something went wrong, Rex would be the one to keep him going. He wrote about how Rex had always been there for him, no matter the situation. And then, there's this." Emma handed Jake the letter. As he read it, his heart tightened. The words were simple, but the meaning was profound. "If anything happens, Rex, you have to know, I'm proud of you. You've been the best partner I could ever ask for. Take care of yourself, and don't let the world take you down. You've always been my hero." Jake paused, the words hitting him harder than he expected. He looked at Rex, who was sitting beside him, his head tilted slightly, as if listening to the story unfolding. "You were always his hero, buddy," Jake whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Rex nudged his hand with his nose, as if to reassure him. "And you've always been mine." As Jake finished reading the letter, he felt the weight of everything they had been through together, the pain, the loss, the separation. But he also felt something else, a deep sense of peace. Rex had never been alone in his struggles. Neither had Jake. Together, they had made it through the worst. And now, with the truth finally revealed, They could both begin to heal, knowing that no matter what came next, they would face it together, side by side. The days following the revelation of the letter brought a new sense of understanding between Jake and Rex. They spent their time reflecting on the past, not in sadness, but in gratitude. The weight of the years of unspoken struggles between them seemed to lift, and they were finally able to begin healing, not just physically, but emotionally. As Jake sat in his favorite chair one evening, Rex curled up by his feet. He looked out the window at the quiet world outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, and the gentle evening breeze carried the promise of change. "You know, Rex," Jake said softly, "I never realized just how much we've been through until now. It wasn't just the missions. It was everything. The pain, the loss, the silence we both carried." Rex raised his head, his amber eyes meeting Jake's with an almost knowing expression, as if to say, "I understand." Jake smiled gently, his heart swelling with appreciation for the dog who had always been there, even when words failed them. The following morning, Jake took Rex out for their usual walk. The park was calm, almost serene, with only the sound of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the breeze. As they walked, Jake couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. There had been a time when he thought he was alone in the world, that the war had taken everything from him, including his chance at a normal life. But now, with Rex by his side, he felt whole again. He had found a purpose, not in the mission he had once served, but in the quiet moments he shared with Rex. The bond between them had become more than just companionship. It was a testament to resilience, loyalty, and love. As they reached the far side of the park, Jake paused and knelt down to Rex's level. "I owe you everything, buddy," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved me more times than I can count, and now, it's my turn to save you." Rex tilted his head slightly, his tail giving a soft wag as if to acknowledge the sentiment. Jake reached out and gently scratched behind Rex's ears, a small gesture that carried more meaning than words ever could. "We're in this together," Jake murmured. Rex's gaze never left him, and for a moment, Jake felt the weight of the world lift from his shoulders. The bond they shared was undeniable, unbreakable, and stronger than anything they had faced in the past. As the days passed, Jake and Rex continued their routine, but there was a new sense of purpose in every step they took. The letter, the patch, the history they had uncovered. It had all brought them closer, but it had also reminded them of the future they still had ahead of them. No longer burdened by the ghosts of the past, they were free to move forward, side by side, ready to face whatever challenges came their way. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the stars appear in the night sky, Jake leaned back in his chair, a contented sigh escaping his lips. "We've earned this peace, Rex," he said quietly. "We've earned every moment of it." Rex sat beside him, resting his head on Jake's knee, the two of them lost in the quiet comfort of each other's company. And in that moment, Jake knew that no matter what life threw at them, they would always have each other. The past was behind them, and the future was theirs to shape together. As the weeks passed, Jake and Rex continued their life in quiet harmony. Every morning, the sun would rise, casting a soft glow over the world around them, and they would walk together through the neighborhood. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The connection they shared had grown beyond words, beyond anything Jake could have imagined when they first met. Rex, once a soldier's companion, was now his partner in life. He had been through so much, but now, with Jake, he could finally rest. For the first time in years, Jake felt the weight of the past lifting. He had spent so long haunted by the memories of the war, the things he'd seen and done, that he hadn't realized how much of his own peace had been lost. But with Rex, he had found that peace again. They had both been through a lot, and they both knew what it meant to survive, to hold on, to never give up. And now, every day was a reminder of that strength. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the stars twinkle in the clear night sky, Jake looked over at Rex, who was lying peacefully at his feet. The dog's eyes were closed, his breathing slow and steady, content in the moment. "You know, Rex," Jake murmured, "I never imagined we'd end up like this. I thought I was done, after everything. But you kept me going." Rex's ears twitched at the sound of his name, and Jake reached down to scratch behind his ears. I guess we're both survivors, he added quietly. Rex's tail gave a soft thump on the ground, as if in agreement. Jake smiled. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the understanding that only time and experience could build. They had both found their way through the darkness, and now, together, they could look toward the future. I'm proud of you, boy, Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. You've been through hell, and you never gave up. You kept fighting, even when it felt like there was nothing left. Rex opened his eyes and looked up at Jake, his amber gaze calm and steady. It was as if the dog understood, as if he knew exactly what Jake was feeling. They shared a bond that no one else could understand, a bond forged through hardship and trust. I won't ever leave you, Rex, Jake whispered. The dog's tail thumped again, a soft and reassuring sound that made Jake's heart swell with gratitude. In that moment, Jake knew that no matter what happened, they would always have each other. The world outside might change, circumstances might shift, but the bond between them would never falter. They had survived together, and now they would live together. The future, whatever it held, was theirs to face, side by side. Jake and Rex were a team, and that was all they needed to know. As the night wore on, the stars above them shimmered brightly, and the quiet comfort of the evening wrapped around them like a blanket. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the day lift, the peace that had eluded him for so long finally settling into his soul. Rex, by his side, was the constant reminder that some bonds never break, that loyalty and love could overcome anything. We made it, buddy, Jake whispered again, as if reaffirming a truth he had known deep down all along. Rex nuzzled his hand, and together, they sat in the quiet, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together, just as they always had. Months passed, and Jake and Rex's life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Each day brought with it simple pleasures, walks through the park, quiet evenings on the porch, and the warmth of companionship. But even as the peace between them grew, Jake could feel something stirring within him. There was still one thing that lingered in the back of his mind, a question he hadn't quite been able to let go of. What would life look like for them now? Jake had always been a soldier, had always been driven by purpose and duty. But now, with Rex at his side, he found himself questioning what came next. The past, the war, the mission, it all seemed so distant now, and yet, it was still a part of who he was a part of. Who Rex was. One evening, after dinner, Jake sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of him, staring out the window into the darkness. Rex lay at his feet, as always, his presence a constant comfort. What now, buddy? Jake asked, his voice low, almost as if talking to himself. What do we do now that the war is behind us? Rex lifted his head, his amber eyes meeting Jake's. The dog's gaze was steady, calm, as if saying, whatever comes, we face it together. Jake smiled faintly, feeling the familiar warmth that came from knowing Rex was there, by his side, through everything. But the question still lingered. What was next for them? Could they ever truly leave the past behind? It wasn't that Jake was looking to forget. He knew he never would. But the future, it seemed, was full of possibilities, and he wanted to find a way forward. As the days went on, Jake took small steps toward answering that question. He volunteered at a local shelter, using the skills he had learned in the service to help train dogs. It was fulfilling, and it brought him a sense of purpose. But it wasn't just about helping the dogs. It was about finding a new way to live, a way that honored the past without being consumed by it. Rex, of course, was with him every step of the way. They were a team, and as Jake spent time with the other dogs, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for what he had with Rex. Rex had been through so much, and yet he had never stopped giving, never stopped loving. And Jake realized that he had something special with this dog, something that couldn't be replaced or replicated. One afternoon, after a long day of working with the dogs at the shelter, Jake and Rex sat on the porch, the setting sun casting a warm glow over everything. Rex, as always, was by his side, his head resting on Jake's leg. The bond between them was quiet, unspoken, but it was there, as strong as ever. Jake looked down at Rex, his heart full. You know, Rex, Jake said softly, I think we're exactly where we're meant to be. Rex lifted his head and gazed up at him, his eyes calm, steady, as if in agreement. It was In that moment that Jake realized that the future didn't need to be figured out all at once. They didn't need to have all the answers. All they needed was each other. And that was enough. The past would always be with them, a part of who they were, but it no longer had to define them. They could move forward together, finding new purpose in each day, in the quiet moments, in the bond they shared. The world outside might change, but their connection, their loyalty, would always remain. Together, they were unstoppable, and that was all that mattered. Jake leaned back in his chair, looking out at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The future was uncertain, but with Rex by his side, Jake felt ready for whatever it held. They had both come through so much, and now, with each other, they were ready to face whatever came next, together. As the weeks turned into months, Jake and Rex found themselves in a place neither had expected, a life of calm, of routine, and yet still filled with purpose. Jake had begun to feel something he hadn't thought possible after everything, the desire to live fully again. He had always been driven by duty, but now, his purpose was rooted in the quiet moments shared with Rex. The shelter work had become a daily routine, and with every dog he helped, Jake felt a deeper connection to the work. But it was more than that. It was a new beginning. One afternoon, after a long day, Jake found himself sitting outside on the porch, his hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. Rex sat beside him, his head resting on Jake's knee, the two of them content in the silence that only years of companionship could bring. The evening sky was painted with hues of pink and orange as the sun began to set, and Jake let out a deep breath. "I never thought I'd get to a place like this," Jake said softly, almost to himself. "After everything that's happened, I thought I'd be stuck in the past. But here we are." Rex lifted his head slightly, his amber eyes looking up at him, steady and calm. It was as if the dog understood exactly what Jake meant, as if he had always known that together, they would find peace. Jake scratched behind Rex's ears, a small gesture, but one that spoke volumes. "You've been my rock, buddy," Jake continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you. You saved me, more than you'll ever know." Rex's tail thumped lightly against the wooden floor of the porch, a soft acknowledgement, a sign that the bond between them was stronger than words. The bond they shared wasn't just about the war they had both survived. It was about the quiet moments, the shared understanding, and the comfort of knowing they weren't alone anymore. They had faced the darkness together, and now, they were building a future. Jake looked up at the sky, the last rays of sunlight fading, and he thought about how far they had come. He had once thought that his life was over after the war, that he would be lost forever in the memories of what had been. But now, with Rex at his side, he felt different. He felt like he had been given a second chance, not just to survive, but to live. The life they had now was simple, but it was enough. There was no need for the past to define them anymore. They had moved on, together, stronger than before. And as Jake sat there, the warmth of the evening wrapping around him like a blanket, he felt a peace that had once seemed impossible. It wasn't just the work at the shelter, or the quiet walks they took together, or the peaceful nights spent on the porch. It was the fact that, with Rex by his side, Jake had found a purpose again. He had found the strength to look forward, to face the future with hope. "We're doing it, Rex," Jake said quietly, looking down at the dog beside him. "We're building something new. Together." Rex gave a soft, contented sigh, closing his eyes, trusting Jake completely. And in that moment, Jake knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, side by side. Rex had always been more than a dog. He was a companion, a protector, and most of all, a reminder that no matter how dark things had been, there was always light ahead, always hope for a new beginning.